The reason for this evening is to give more of an opportunity to explore some of the things we've been presenting in a number of the previous videos, webinars, and to go into them in a little more depth. What I'm going to do to start with is just do a quick summary slide, share that with you. This is a little bit of a summary slide. So this is research work which is done by LETI, a Low Energy Transformation Initiative, about sort of 80 odd contributors, non-aligned workstream, published this document, Retrofit-at-Scale, which followed up on a previous publication which was looking at best practice. We felt a follow-up was needed because it became clear that few people can afford best practice, so or exemplar. Therefore, what can we do? And the more we dug into it, the more we realized that there's so many opportunities to improve the way we deliver retrofit. And I'll start by saying that what we decided to do was focus on heating. That's not to preclude anything else, but we're aware that, for example, PV and batteries and so forth have an economic model which can be made to work because it's revenue earning. Heating for occupants, on the other hand, doesn't quite work in the same way, and we're having a lot more problems dealing with the heat and the switch over to electric heat pumps of one form or another. So the more we dug into it, the more we really realized there was these four linked components. One is a better understanding of what householders are after. Fundamentally, just switching to a heat pump and the bills are the same, roughly, up a bit, down a bit, doesn't work. They're after savings on their heating bills, and therefore reducing the demand for heat as well as switching over. The issue of disruption was a key component, with so much of the industry talking about, oh, well, we'll do it. It'll take us 3 months to do this or something or other. We were keen to look at minimizing the site time to be able to reduce the heating bills and do the heat pump switchover. And we realized that we could do it for almost 2/3 less money than a typical deep retrofit cost by making sure you've got integrated teams, things like that. We also were aware that basically householders want some kind of warranty that they're actually getting what they were offered, or if they are paying for it themselves, what they paid for, because at the moment they don't. The second aspect of it was the need for this to become community-based. The integrated teams, in other words, you're not talking about an umbrella organization as a single point of contact under which you've got lots of individual trade contractors all in their separate organizations, all with those overheads and those split priorities as individuals. We wanted a team, multi-skilled team, which can do your average home. We're not looking at the big end of the market. We're not looking at dwellings which need a lot of repair for the fabric. We're focused on the energy aspects. So there may need to be repairs to the building fabric, water penetration, things like that need to be sorted out. But we're focusing on the energy component. And one of the things we found by having this integrated team was we could eliminate almost 40% of the cost, which is normally overheads. The overheads of all these individual different organizations, each coming and doing their own survey, things like that, when you can integrate them into one, for example. And ultimately, we're looking at a productivity step change. And this was largely driven because the Climate Change Committee's advice to government is retrofit for energy doesn't really make economic sense for the UK to get to zero carbon. It's far cheaper just to add some more wind turbines. Indeed, the seventh carbon budget added an extra 30 gigawatts of wind, as opposed to necessarily going any further with retrofit or whatever in buildings. But once you look at changing that equation to reduce the cost of retrofit, it becomes a more level playing field. But I'll come back, one could go into that in more depth. But ultimately, to be able to harness or get that additional productivity, you're then down at box number 3, new processes and products. At the moment, we have Rolls-Royce MVHR, in other words, mechanical ventilation, heat recovery, all singing, all dancing, humidity control and what have you, and that's it. Others around the world, and indeed at one stage in the UK, we have far simpler systems at considerably less cost and less intervention into the dwelling. And the importance of looking at the ventilation strategy is one of the big gains in reducing heat demand in a dwelling is reducing uncontrolled infiltration, drafts and so forth and so on. You cannot do that unless you've got a good ventilation strategy to remove the moisture that we all generate when we're showering, washing, cooking and so forth. Therefore, it comes hand in hand. But we also identified that the supply chain ain't very good at supplying the right size heat pumps. Most of them are considerably oversized. And so we all began to start looking at how you simplify putting a heat pump in to make it a 2-day process, and what interventions with the fabric to reduce the heat demand allowed you not to need to touch the radiators, for example, because you're getting enough output, even though the heat pump works at a lower temperature. We also started developing the ideas, the principle that we needed an alternative approach to the enormous great hot water cylinder that your average heat pump supplier offers you. Most homes in the sector we're looking at, the middle of the sector, which is more than 2/3 of the market, have not got space for an additional store or an additional plant room or large cupboard. So we were keen to come up with solutions which in effect meant your hot water storage slotted into the gap vacated by your combi boiler, for example. In other words, no loss of floor space within the dwelling. Finally, we then got a policy framework to allow this to work. And at the top level, we wanted to say, okay, we're going to put some more money into retrofit, but it should not cost the UK any more for getting us to net zero carbon. For example, the idea that we reduce peak demand is particularly important for avoiding throwing a lot of money, something like 90 billion, at the national grid just for a few hours in winter when the peak demand occurs. The more you can reduce that peak demand, the more they save money on the grid. We're asking for that money to be redirected into the retrofit, which allows that supply side capacity to be reduced. And then we also looked at certain of the sectors where it's difficult to get penetration, like private rented sector, and also trying to look at models from abroad which are a little more robust in the longer term than just throwing the old grant at it, which means each change of government decides whether they're going to flip-flop between that or not. The idea of tax credit for those who are able to pay as an alternative solution, for example. That skates over the work, but it does illustrate potentially the a way of doing your average home, your 95 square meter terrace, semi, whatever, potentially flats as well, each one with a heat pump and selective fabric improvements for less than £20,000 each. I'll leave it at that, and I'll throw it open for questions. So get your questions ready, and I will now stop sharing. So, who would like to start? Any particular questions, or shall I start by feeding off some of the discussions we had at the previous sessions? Any questions? Any hands up? If you can be thinking about your questions, or I'm acutely aware that because we're covering those 4 different aspects, different people have very different queries with regard to how implementation may work. And indeed, only yesterday, I was invited into the Climate Change Committee. They're very aware that most of the advice they get are for the special interest groups, like heat pump suppliers. I just quote that because, but it could be insulation people who have a business priority to sell bigger and more heat pumps. The idea that we are saying instead of installing one heat pump every 2 weeks for a small team, we're actually looking at one every 2 days, and you're doing therefore installing 5 of them in that same duration. Therefore, your profit is spread across 5 projects, not one. Is the sort of thing we're beginning to try and get people to think about an alternative way forward. So thank you for those. Joseph, do you want to? I'm not sure who was first. Yeah, Joseph.
Thank you.
Would like to fire away?
What is the process in order to ensure that there isn't too much moisture in the property?
Okay. Well, there's two sides to this. One is day-to-day moisture. I mentioned showering, cooking, washing. I'll come back to that in a moment. The other water is water that comes from outside, rain from the ground, so forth, and groundwater, so forth, rising damp. The latter ones are normally because there is a fault somewhere in the pipe system, or the damp-proof membrane, or the ventilation below the floor. If you've got a ventilated cavity below the floor as part of your groundwater protection. I won't talk so much about those, but they need to be sorted, and they will need a specialist going round, and well, it's not normally rocket science to fix the downpipes on the or renew the guttering, for example. You may need a little more of a specialist if you've got rising damp because your damp membrane or layer has deteriorated. Most of the issues we are often faced with, though, going forward are to do with the moisture we generate inside the dwelling. And our regulations aren't very good at this because our buildings have always been very leaky. And therefore, the moisture gets picked up by the air and disappears through all the gaps and the drafts. The more we move towards energy efficient buildings, the more we are reducing that airflow because the heat goes out with the moisture. And for that reason, we need some kind of ventilation system. We're advocating a very basic mechanical system. So a supply air and an extract fan, a heat recovery and filters in a box ducted to some of the main rooms so that we can be sure there is always that minimum background ventilation rate to be able to pick up that moisture and remove it and take it out of the building. Does that sort of somehow address your question, or have you something specific beyond that?
Sorry, yeah, it's a general question, so thank you for that.
Okay, fine, great. Bridget?
Hi, thanks for your overview. I attended one of your previous webinars, and you were talking about the size of heat pumps.
Yep.
Now, I was at one of our projects yesterday, and it's a tiny house, probably about 75, 85 square meters, really small house, 2-story. And they had a standard, what I would call a standard heat pump outside. So it's almost like a meter square.
Yeah, the great big thing. Yeah.
And everyone was sort of nodding and saying that's the appropriate size for that house. And I was a bit confused because I know that you're looking at like smaller heat pumps.
Yep.
But what is how do you assess? How do you measure the size of heat pump that you need for your floor space?
Well, there's the way it's done conventionally, and then there's the fact that some of us are saying that isn't a very good way of doing it. So I'm being sucked into a British Standard committee now to review the British Standard, which is in fact based on a European standard, to try and update that. And perhaps it's worth just mentioning a little bit of history. It's the same sizing method that was used for sizing boilers. And they've just rolled it over and done a couple of tweaks to it. But fundamentally, if your boiler is oversized, it doesn't actually look oversized. Heat exchanger is bigger, the flames are bigger, so forth and so on, but they fit it into the same box. A heat pump is bigger because it's operating at lower temperature differences. It doesn't have, a 400 degrees flame in it, for example, 400 degrees. So to get the best out of the heat pump and indeed size it correctly, you need a more sophisticated method of sizing it. And unfortunately, the industry is at the moment reluctant to take that on board. And therefore, everyone you will talk to who installs them say, yeah, that's the way to it, that's adequate. One of the other related things is noise. One of the ways to reduce the noise of a heat pump is to run the fan slower, but have a bigger fan. So the fan's bigger, therefore the box is bigger, but the noise is lower. Absolutely, we need low noise, but there are other ways of doing it. For example, Dyson has managed to make far quieter hair dryers, but operating with 10,000 revs per minute motor inside it. There are other ways of making things quieter than just simply making them bigger. It's the easy option to make them bigger, and sorry, I'm speaking from a personal point of view, there's an element of suppliers justifying the money when it looks like a big bit of kit. But if we look elsewhere, if we look into the same technology used for many years for mechanical cooling, because it's roughly the same animal, we never used to put them on the ground. We mount them on the walls. They're smaller and they work perfectly adequately. So we believe there is a lot of potential for the way we resize heat pumps. But the people at the coalface are simply taking what they're told by the suppliers, MCS and so forth and so on. MCS are considering changing their methodology. They're looking to the BS. That's why I've been sucked in, for example, to help them on that, to try and get to the source of the problem, to try and get these heat pumps correctly sized. And there's more in the report the free download report in the annex, which talks about how you control it. And for example, if on the coldest day you run it almost continuously 24/7, not a boost in the morning and you just run it during the day. If you do the latter way, you need a large heat pump. If you want to minimize the size of the heat pump, you want it to run continuously. It might deliver a slightly lower temperature during the night by a couple of degrees or what have you. But the idea of stopping and starting a heat pump means you need a larger heat pump, for example. And that's what suppliers are often trying to cover themselves, because most occupants in the UK still expect to have a time switch and we'll save some money by turning it off overnight. Actually, it doesn't save them much money, and it makes the heat pump a lot bigger and more difficult to find a location for. So what we're after is heat pumps which are smaller, mount on the wall. They're also smaller because we're looking at including the air tightness I mentioned, some insulation, renovating windows, not necessarily replacing. If you've got double glazing already, it's replace the hinges. They're the mechanical bit which wear with time. But those sorts of things reduce the heat demand, which means the heat pump doesn't need to deliver as much heat, and therefore can also be smaller because of that. We're also looking at high performance, low flow shower heads, 6 litres per minute, for example, rated using the European labelling system, which means you need less hot water, and therefore the heat pump can be smaller. So you can see a whole series of things which contribute to potentially making the heat pump a lot smaller. But having said that, it's going to need a certain amount of time for the industry to simply to be able to deliver that. But the aim is to try and get clusters of clients, housing associations, so forth and so on, together to try and push the industry and potentially attract some innovation funding for developing these smaller heat pumps and the methodology for doing it, so that you aren't faced with what you've talked about, which is a heat pump installer and everybody else looking around and say, oh, that looks like the norm, that should be all right. In future, it will not be all right, because there's a lot of dwellings where there simply isn't the space to install them.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. And the person, one of the people that I was talking to was a private landlord.
Yes.
And it was great that he was there and that he was interested. But I think because we work primarily in we just work in the private sector.
Yep.
And I think these kind of solutions are going to be essential, because for a private landlord, for example, who's got a tenant, the amount of disruption of doing retrofit as it's currently presented,
yes,
is quite a challenge.
I appreciate that.
I just wonder, it would be really good actually to maybe have a conversation with the private landlords associations. So
yeah.
a bit.
What I would say is, perhaps to reiterate, the market supply chains aren't ready. We need to provide them with the right incentives for them to be able to offer smaller heat pumps. It is only in the last year that we've started to see heat pumps smaller than 5 kilowatts coming into the market. Most of them 6, 7, 8, 12 or whatever, which are often grossly oversized. But if you consider those same heat pump suppliers are supplying the new build, which have got heat demand which is perhaps half of an insulated retrofit, and you're wondering, what the hell are they doing not being able to supply smaller heat pumps? We're beginning to see a bit of a change in that direction, but it does indicate the supply industry is a little bit behind the curve at the moment.
Yeah, sorry, last comment from me. Then I'll
Yeah, fire away, keep going.
Because the house that we were looking at is one that had been empty. It's been fully retrofitted. External wall insulation, solar panels, floor insulation, that kind of thing. So the heat pump did just seem enormous.
And I would imagine won't be running very efficiently because it would be starting and stopping. And it's the same old equation of do you run a 6-litre engine in a car around a town in first gear? It doesn't like it. But yes, absolutely agree. There's plenty of work and scope to try and address a lot of those issues, even if the industry isn't yet ready for it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Georgina.
Right. There are three things. I mean, you've kind of touched on one of them about the smaller kind of heat pumps. And I think there was something put in the chat about smaller units being fitted, and they seem to be about the size of a normal kind of, a normal boiler. So you're saying that obviously they do exist, but you're saying the supply chain just isn't there at the moment.
The supply chain is falling over themselves just to expand to hit government numbers for number of heat pumps. They have no problem selling the heat pumps they've got. So why should they put themselves out to look at different sizes and so forth and so on? That's the issue we've got at the moment. We need to drive demand and make it clear that we're not going to pay the costs they're currently saying, to start getting them to think about providing smaller ones, physically smaller ones.
Okay, because someone in our group, Martha, I mean, you know who I'm talking about, Nicola. She was saying that they had started to kind of fit smaller pumps in Westminster. I need to get some more information about that, but that would be interesting to kind of look into.
Absolutely. Certainly, we've seen in the last year a couple of 4 kilowatt ones coming out. And I know if you go to exhaust air heat pumps, you can get down to about 1.5 kilowatts, but they need very well insulated dwellings. So they're probably best suited to new build flats, apartment flats, for example. So, we've got a gap in the market at the moment.
Okay. Which brings me on to the other thing. I know at the previous talks that you've given, you were saying that you're finding it difficult to gain traction with the government and with local authorities as well. And I was wondering whether anything had changed or that remains the same. I mean, once again, it wasn't actually people from the council I invited tonight, but we're supposed to be getting new double glazing because we've got single glazing at the moment on our estate. And so I keep inviting the people that are involved in that to these meetings, but they never come. So it's like, I don't know what's going on there. So are you gaining more traction or not? And then there'll be one final question, but I'll let you answer that first.
Yes, we are gaining traction, but the issue is we're starting from a very low base. And therefore, it's going to take time to generate it. As I said, talking to the Climate Change Committee, they recognise a lot of these issues. But, for example, they've just issued their 7th carbon budget. Their 8th carbon budget will be in 3 years' time. Now, that's a timescale. They're starting to gather information ready for that. So for them to then make policy to government, you're talking 3 years. That just gives you an idea of the inertia in the system. So absolutely, we have to work not only at the top end, but more particularly at the bottom end with people who get it, to try and get enough clusters of people working on it together. We can then start getting innovation funding to help push it along and publicize it.
Okay, I mean, we in our submission, refurbish, don't demolish, in our submission to
Yes.
there's a consultation at the moment for the London plan for Sadiq Khan's London
Yep.
plan, and we did actually put your document in there and suggest they look at that.
Thank you for that.
We will wait and see what happens with that. Okay, there's the last question, I suppose, it's a bit of an individual one because as I say, it probably won't happen until next year, but we're going to be getting double glazing put in. And I know that there are cases of like some people having double glazing put in. We've got really bad condensation at the moment. Well, not right now, but I mean, we tend to get bad condensation throughout the house. One of the worst rooms is actually a small bedroom that my partner and I share. Now, and the window is just, maybe we should stop breathing. I don't know. That's probably the answer. Is there anything specific that we should be kind of asking of them apart from just putting in the double glazing? Because I don't know.
Ultimately, they should not be considering putting in double glazing to which will reduce the air leakage without a ventilation strategy being included with it. You cannot do one without the other, because condensation is likely to get worse if you add double glazing in. Now, and I would distinguish between two bits of double glazing. Condensation. Condensation on glass happens normally, even, you know, the stuff I've got double glazing, low E, whatever, in the bathroom. Water condenses on it when you have a shower, but it dries off within half an hour or whatever. Because I know I've got a ventilation system, it changes the air in the room and removes that moisture, evaporates that moisture. If you do not have a ventilation strategy, your condensation is likely to get worse.
Okay. I mean, at the moment, they're writing the specification. They haven't put it out to tender yet, but this is something that we can get back to them about and ask them, because I don't remember them saying anything about any ventilation strategy. Okay. So thank you for that.
Okay, great. Next, we have David.
Hiya. Okay, so one thing I was curious about is how much work has been done around the kind of cost of deployment of this. So one thing I've found when we've been like pricing things up for the village we're looking at in Wales, which is mainly social housing, some owner occupiers, but the main thing we're finding is it's actually the cost of getting people on site, which is enormous.
I recognize that.
And I mean, so our kind of strategy on this is to try and you've got somebody on site, keep them on site for as long as you can and do as many as you can all at once, if you see what I mean, rather than keep having repeated visits. Is there any kind of work being done on how much that saves, if anything?
No, I haven't seen that specific strategy, but I can understand why you're doing it. And our conclusion was bringing individual trades on site one at a time doesn't really deliver all the cost benefits that are potentially there.
Right, okay.
The idea that someone can't do the electrical bit and therefore he gets called away to work on another project, even if it's around the corner, stop-start of that kind of process, we need to eliminate that. In new build, commercial new build, you hit it once and you make sure you have each of the related trades there alongside them, working alongside. They may be working in different rooms, but fundamentally you try and make sure you manage the process so that you get all of the trades. You've got the plumber, you've got the heat pump, you've got the insulation, you've got the ventilation, you've got someone supervising it. You hit it hard once.
Yeah.
And the thing what that generally needs is a good pre-survey and not the heat pump person or the insulation's coming along and doing their own survey. It's one person doing an integrated survey to cover all of those different trades. Now, this is where the current system falls down, because I quote the heat pump installer, he's a separate commercial organization. He's not going to rely on someone else's survey. What happens if it gives him the wrong size heat pump? Whereas if you're all part of the same organization, that heat pump installer can anticipate that there's insulation going in, and therefore puts in the appropriate smaller heat pump, as opposed to based on the survey when it was originally done pre-retrofit of any insulation. So you can see it's an integrated process we're after, which gives main cost benefits, but absolutely recognize you're beginning on that path of trying to work out how you simplify, rationalize the use of each of the trade contractors, because, as I say, we were finding 40% of the cost was delivering, was being used in overheads, as you say, getting people to site, but also other things like long-term welfare facilities on site and so forth and so on. So I know there is a lot of money that can be saved in that direction.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, one of the kind of key things which we're looking at anyway is everything, that the entire retrofit process is 220 houses we're looking at across the entire village. Nearly all of them 1850s mining cottages.
Yeah.
And so there's some stuff which can be done, some stuff can't be done, but we have actually, but the idea is we've got an overarching organisation, a community organisation, which is going to manage that entire kind of rollout. So we have got this,
and accumulate the knowledge of how to do that specific kind of dwelling. Yeah, with all of the trades, so that everybody isn't learning everything anew for each dwelling. Yeah,
exactly. That's the thing. So, all right, that's good to hear that. All right, so
okay, great.
I'm happy with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Iris.
Yes, hi. So, like I said, we're trying to pull off a solar scheme for domestic grids, but the point of it is partly not. It's really not just about the solar, because we're working with lots of our partners to see the solar as a sort of introductory measure, or as somebody said, a gateway drug.
Yeah.
So, because on the whole, we don't see solar as being something that will prevent other things from happening. It doesn't interfere with it doesn't really interfere with very many things if you avoid a couple of mistakes, sort of thing. So that's how we understand it, and we want to work with streets and with neighbours, and we're starting to set up groups of neighbours, and now in a position where we can start talking to people about the solar, and we want to involve people, because when I say people, they're generally people who live in similar houses. So this might be a couple of, so we have some people who are in 1895 houses. We have some people who are in 1932 houses. And some people in 1953 houses. So, but they would be grouped in a way that the people that are working together are the people that are well, they are the ones that know about each other's houses. In this, because
they can learn from the experience.
And we're thinking that there's a power within that we are trying to sort of the retrofit work comes as an add-on later on. Because they're already be galvanized as a group, because we're trying to do retrofit as the solar installation already as a sort of scheme. So there is I'm just trying to sort of check with you that you think it's the right approach, that we want to try and make that something that will work.
Well,
working with the communities, trying to get sort of sets of decision making by the community, how they want to So, you know, how do they want their houses to be?
What I would say is absolutely right having it at that community level, but somehow you need to change the way the schemes are delivered.
Yes.
Because that's where the money goes.
Well, this is exactly what I'm trying to say. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to make this as independent as possible.
Well, the idea
giving people the knowledge really early on.
Well, you know, the idea of actually finding local people to train up as heat pump installers or insulation, going on courses and so on, so that they feel part of the team as opposed to setting them up as independent companies, so that you end up then rewriting the process of delivery. Otherwise, you're going out to the market for competitive prices for each of the different components. Project manager spends an arm and a leg in time terms to put it all together, and you're driven by how busy those individual trades are. So actually, there's employment opportunities here.
We are looking at working. So we're in touch with the college. We're in touch with a couple of agencies that have got green skills programs locally, and we're trying to pull that in. Clearly, that is slightly so. We're doing that with partners as well, so that we're all trying to pull at the same string, sort of thing. Trying to not double up on our work, trying to not reinvent the wheel constantly locally. So we're trying really hard. It's just so complicated.
I fully acknowledge that. Until the process is sort of put together and you're in a position to then start learning and feeding back into that process, it's often a very big innovation hump.
Yes, it is.
So I wish you the best.
Watch this space. We're going to try.
Great. Thank you. Let's see. Have we got Kayla?
That's okay. My name is Kayla. It's all in one. Hello. First of all, I wanted to thank you for all the efforts that you're making in smoothing out the route for retrofits for across the country, and this amazing 191-page report, which is so impressive. And I haven't been able to read it in complete, in every detail yet.
Dip in and out as you see fit.
Yeah, it's been absolutely enlightening, and I'm just grateful that there's this work being done to smoothen the path to retrofit at scale. You hit the nail on the head. So my organization is a community energy group called Brighton and Hove Energy Services Cooperative. And we've been trading for 13 years. And for 13 years, we've been obsessed with trying to accelerate retrofits. We have retrofit coordinators on our team, retrofit assessors, and we've done 3 projects now on a community level to try and encourage retrofit at scale. And so, of course, when your report came out, we found it fascinating to see your observations. One of the things that we've learned during this process is that community groups, and it's also witnessed by the people who have just spoken before me, can be an amazing route to market for qualified suppliers. We think that is a huge benefit and can add value to this to the chain by using the local community energy groups to cut down on some of that overhead cost. And also they can create a demand pull for the suppliers. And I agree with you, there should be like one contractor who oversees the implementation of measures. Otherwise, it gets very complicated also for the customer. But the other thing is that we've installed quite a few air source heat pumps over the years, and these require a certain level of expertise. As we all know, there's quite a few installations of air source heat pumps that don't go quite right.
Yep.
And we're always, because we own and operate the equipment on behalf of our customers, we're always going in and helping them make sure that they go well. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm really grateful for everything, and I'm hoping that in the future that you bring in community energy groups. There's more than 300 of us across the country with a lot of experience in this area, and we can help these kind of programs become successful. I think we're never going to be able to do this on our own. It's about all of us working together to really, really make change.
Okay, well, absolutely support what you're doing. And indeed, trying to make the argument that it reduces the costs for the supply chain is often a little bit difficult because they see it as all as a fragmented market. They much prefer to deal with the Barretts, who will then order up 300 heat pumps all under one order type of thing, all to be delivered in one go. But absolutely agree that the aggregation of all the community groups should be able to exceed anything that Barrett's would put in as an order, for example.
Yeah,
that's where we need to be focusing.
Okay, thank you. Let me just say one more thing is in all of the projects we did, people just did not work on the same schedules. They had different ideas about what they wanted to do and when they wanted to do it. It became really hard. It was like herding cats to get everybody.
I recognize that. That sounds like a construction industry through and through.
Okay. Yes. Thank you.
I wish you the best of luck. Thank you very much for that. Right. I think we've been through most of the questions we've got here at the moment. One welcomes other questions. If you want to put something on the WhatsApp, I'm sure there's details of the WhatsApp which can be put in the chat. Nicola, where do you want to go from here?
Hello there. Hello there. Thank you so much to everybody for your brilliant detailed questions. You know as well that these are going to be in the public domain for the education and service of the wider community. It's just a case of the question here is about availability for dissemination. And obviously these videos will be in the public domain, but if I speak on your behalf, Chris, just to say that if you need to contact Chris, all right, to speak directly, all right, that is all part of my email mail out. So if anybody would like to be put into my email mail out, all right, which always CCs Chris, please put your names in the chat right now, and you will be receiving an email from Nicola Kench at groundswellecosystems.com. There might be people in this group who haven't received those emails. Just to let you know as well that when I do send out the email, obviously it's designed, it's meant to be quite comprehensive with all of the materials and links and the one-page summary and so on. It's designed for you to send out as much as possible, okay? So right now, Chris and I don't have any immediate events planned, but because there's so many dots to join, our request to you is that if you have an event that's happening, please email Chris. He'll check your availability and see about the opportunity to come and speak in person, because speaking in person, obviously we've tried to cover this in these videos. Yes. Thank you so much, David. I see that. Speaking in person offers you the opportunity and offers different groups the opportunity to look at all of those loopholes and look at all of those issues that can be really finessed in terms of financial models and technicalities and so on. So please, I've seen that in the chat there. I send out a comprehensive mailing list after these Zoom events, and with the invitation to please continue to contact Chris, and we will be looking to more events in 2026. Thank you so much, Bridget. I see that. Just also to let you know that there are opportunities, Chris, I'm speaking on behalf of you, and I'm going to hand over to you right now, that there are opportunities for engagement, because there are different areas of this that need to be specced out in the context that we are in these discussions right now, looking at different iterations of this and different issues that get encountered. If you would like to contribute to the program or write up a case study, or write up a potential model case study that might tap into your own business or your own enterprise, your own social enterprise, your own business model, please do so, because these are the things that really could stimulate other people to going, yes, that totally makes sense. We can do that on 300K. We can put that tendering model together and submit those to Chris or correspond with Chris regarding what will be a 2025 edition. Because this model is not just designed for when it was released in 2024, it's designed truly to be a permanent benchmark for a scaled, affordable retrofit model in the UK. So the request to everybody is that we need your correspondence. We need your feedback. We need your model building feedback. Right? And as I said, I will send out the group email. And please know that Chris is available. Chris, I'm speaking on your behalf, to be booked for individual sessions to come and visit you and
subject to diary. Yeah,
subject to diary availability. To come and see you and to come and talk about those business models and talk about the technical issues and actually address those issues in person. Okay, any questions? Because really this model is really, this was the missing link in terms of what lobbyists needed, in terms of what the national policy needed. This, and I know you recognize this is the missing link that was needed. This is the kind of thing that can genuinely stimulate a UK-wide, scaled, affordable retrofit industry. Thank you so much. Of course you are, Georgina. You're very much on the list. So just bear in mind that, thank you, Joseph, I see you, that's great. Just bear in mind that what we're looking at here is we're looking at endless tentacles to make this work. All right. I know there are people in other countries who've been interested in this model as well. In Australia, it's a transportable model because the essence of it is about adaptability, right, into what is already there. Any questions, any thoughts, requests?
I'm quite happy to allow people to retire to have that cup of tea and their...
Bridget.
Hi, sorry. Are you in conversation with any government policymakers?
Well, that's why I talked about the Climate Change Committee.
Yeah.
Because they are formulating policy direction for the government, and the government is responding to them. And that's why, at the moment, retrofit doesn't have a particularly high objective in the policy context, other than everybody's got to switch to a heat pump. We know it's far more than just that, and that's why one is talking to them. But I have to say, one would dearly love to have talked to more of the people, policymakers, if you know of opportunities.
Well, we lobby government quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, in a sense, one of the reasons for preparing the document and the way LETI works is to have something which provides evidence and explains it in more detail, because it's very easy to talk policy and then someone from a technical background said, no, you don't want to do that, can't do this, that and the other. We found we had to work at both levels, if not 3 levels, looking at the finance as well. So in a sense, the document was structured or had content which provides ammunition, whether you're talking at a policy level or at a detail level or a supply chain level.
Have you? I've only looked at your comprehensive report.
Yeah.
Which I mean, although I work around retrofitting a lot, I'm by no means an expert. We broker relationships, so I'm not a technical person. It is quite complex, and I wonder whether would it be worth thinking about a kind of a layman's version?
I'm certainly aware there are benefits of drawing out those different aspects. Lay people might be one of them, but certainly something that looks at the policy context, one that looks at the process content, another one which looks at the supply chain content, so that they are in terminology which better suits those. I think may be worthwhile.
Some of the diagrams that you've got are brilliant. Like the one that shows how you can save. So you've got like that big tower on one side of everybody's finger in the pie.
Yeah.
Got a much smaller tower on the other side, which translates into cost savings. That's a brilliant.
But once again, you need all the technical backup. Otherwise, you'll get some, dare I use the word, smart ass cost consultants saying, "Oh no, these costs don't make sense."
We went. I mean, but for a local politician,
yes,
that kind of diagram is really helpful.
I absolutely agree.
You've done the hard graft, if you like, of doing the full technical document. So if somebody questions, you can say, "Well, read this." It's just that it would be
I'm very happy to support. People trying to draw out and helping to develop that. I wouldn't say that was exactly my expertise, shall we say, but very happy to support that because I can see the clear benefits.
Yeah. Well, if you wouldn't mind, it would be quite good to have a go at doing that in liaison with you.
Yeah, that will be.
Because you work at such a local level.
Yeah.
It's that translation process, isn't it? It's
at the moment, just to give you a total aside, one of the fields I am spending a bit of time on, dare I say, is ceiling mounted fans.
Okay.
At the moment, the UK does not use them, and indeed our building regulations for new build or whatever almost specifically excludes it because it's evaporative cooling from your skin as opposed to air temperature. And yet I lived for 3 years in China, in Shanghai, with a slightly warmer climate and so on. The first stage of cooling is always ceiling mounted fans. So I'm leading for SIBC, my professional institution, doing a publication. And as you say, it's got to be a lay person's one because you need to convince policymakers before the technical manual, because the technical manual doesn't sell. There's no demand for it. You need to establish the demand, and the demand comes from other bits of society, and as you say, policymakers is exactly one. So we've got the GLA in our sites and people like that, and certain government departments responsible for building regulations. But until we got that lay person's document, but boy, is it like getting blood out of a stone when you've got 10 technical people around a table and they all want to do a thesis on each different aspect of it, when, as you said, Bridget, you need something which, in your words, is more suitable for a layperson to understand the key issues.
Because they genuinely, I mean, something that has really surprised me with our project is how much appetite there is and how concerned people are. And, even, the people that we need to get to, the people at the local and regional, sub-regional level.
Yeah.
We've got time to read probably like 2 pages of A4, and that needs to be pithy.
Yes, absolutely.
Make sense to them. So they've got something that they can then go and say, this is what we need to be doing. with you know, and when you've got brilliant illustrations like there are in the report,
Yep.
Then anyone who wants anything more technical, they can go to the report. You've got
that's it. The whole idea was
the entry point, isn't it?
This was the information source, and then the idea of some documents, shorter, simpler is the wrong way, but more elegantly phrased documents suitable for different sectors.
Yeah,
absolutely agree.
It's like how people speak, how people have conversations with each other.
That's it.
What do they say? What do they show each other?
Well, I have to say that in the technical field, they probably talk like in the document, and it's absolutely clear that isn't wider society. That's just one subset.
Exactly.
Just to respond to that, Bridget, I hear you completely, and I think it's a question of the key parameters. What are the key parameters? What are the energy efficiency targets, and what's the unit cost, for example? Okay.
Yeah.
There is a single pager which is now available, which I'll send out on the next mail out. But really, it's a very, very breezy summation, which is just as a reference point. But I agree with you completely. It's about that negotiating power in language that anybody can understand, where you can simply go, I'm giving you this version, but all of your answers are in the full document. I agree with you completely. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much. That was great. That was really interesting.
Okay. And thank you for attending. Okay.
Please be aware, everybody, that there are the two first videos out as well. There's the introduction, and then there's the tech spec and costs video as well, which deep dives into that. And then there's this questions video. And really, it's a case of keep in touch. Okay, you are needed. You are right on the front line. Keep in touch. I have your emails. I'll be sending that out next week. And you will also get Chris's email. And please correspond with Chris. Keep in touch. You are needed. You are right on the front line. Thank you.
Great. Okay. So, cheerio, and thank you very much indeed for attending, and thank you for those questions. They were a good set of questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right. Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.